Have you ever had this happen to you? Spend your time repotting a prized, beautiful plant, and in a few days or a few weeks or a few months, you notice your plant is declining, the leaves are wilting, they're dropping off, and it ends up dying and ends up in the trash bin. This can be so frustrating and so disheartening, and this has happened to me multiple times. And I'm going to share with you what I've learned during my plant journey to help you avoid killing your plant after repotting. The most common reason why a plant dies after repotting is using a pot that's way too big. And I've done this so many times there. The reason for that is if the pot is too big, the actual soil can become too dry in some areas. And also some parts of the soil can be too moist for too long, attracting things like fungus or bacterial disease. Take this for example. This is a recent repotting that I did, and in my mind I was thinking, oh my goodness, all these plants here, I can't be bothered repotting it for a long time, so let me just put it into a massive pot and it'll be fine. That means that, you know, in 4 or 5 years I don't have to repot it until then. Well, my mistake was, the pot is way too big, and these are quite hardy plants. These are pothos and philodendrons, and they're generally hardy. They can take a lot of neglect and different conditions, but this pot here is actually killing my plants. And the reason for that is that you can see with these plants here, it's actually not covering all the top part of the soil. So when I do water it, so a lot of parts of the soil is going to stay moist for far too long, attracting bacteria or fungal disease. Not only that, if I take the root system, if I take out one of the plants there, you can see the root system is not very big. It's quite a small root system because these are kind of younger sort of plants. They're not the mature form yet. And so their root system is not established. And so this pot is not only too wide for them, it's also too deep as well. So it means that when I do water this pot, the top part of the soil is more likely going to become dry compared to the bottom part of the soil, which means that I might try and test the soil moisture, but it's going to give me a false reading because the top part is going to be dry, the bottom part is going to be wet, which means that these plants that don't have a established or a big root system, it's not going to gain enough water to actually grow and thrive. And I've noticed that I've repotted this plant about a month ago, and I've already noticed a big decline in these plants. So I'm going to need to repot it into a smaller pot that has not just a smaller pot that's not as wide, but also not as deep as well. And this will help to actually make sure that the plant has water and nutrients at the right consistency rather than being under or over watered in some areas. The other reason I found is that also repotting a plant too early. So the general rule I find that is that to repot a plant, repot it when it's about 80% root bound, which means that 80% of the roots are filling up the pot. Repotting it before then, there is a risk that by disturbing the root system and really sometimes disturbing the root system can actually be really detrimental to the plant, and sometimes it actually can kill the plant as well. And when repotting a plant, you're always going to cause some sort of damage to the roots. It's impossible, well, virtually impossible to not damage any of the roots at all. Even no matter how careful one is, the roots can become damaged, and you don't want to unnecessarily do this to the plant because it actually hinders the actual growth of the plant. I also found that by repotting too early, which means that sometimes you buy a plant from the nursery, and from the nursery, these plants have been growing by the growers in the perfect condition. It can be in a greenhouse where the light is getting as much light as it needs. the temperature is controlled, the humidity is controlled, and they're in like the perfect condition. And then they're brought into the plant store, and so it's actually been, the plant is already under stress from that move, and then bring it home where the household condition or outdoor condition can be completely different to the nursery greenhouse. It means that it puts the plant under even more stress, and repotting it straight away after purchasing can be very harmful to the plant because it hasn't actually acclimated to the home condition. So I generally find that it's good to, after purchasing a plant, leave it for about 1 or 2 months and then repot the plant. While this plant is actually acclimating to the home condition, you can also check and see if there's fungal disease, bacterial disease, or pest occurring, and treat that before repotting the plant. And the only time I would say that I would repot it directly from the after purchasing is if I find that the soil is not the right substrate. So sometimes what happens is that these plants from the nursery, they're grown in a very like peat moss or coil sort of, not even peat moss, but maybe a very moisture holding sort of mixture. And this may not be suitable for the home condition. And I find that, like especially in Melbourne, if these plants are growing just in pure like coco coir mixture, then it's actually holding too much moisture for too long, because Melbourne can get quite cold, and this can actually lead to root rot. So if I do see this in my plants, I will tend to repot it a little bit more faster compared to 1 or 2 months of waiting. The other time that I find that after repotting a plant it dies is that using the wrong soil mixture. So plants, they come in different, they've come from different areas of the world. They can be the tropical area, the desert area, a mixture of it. And using the wrong soil mixture when repotting can actually kill the plant. And what I tend to do is that if I have a new plant and I don't actually know what the soil condition it's growing in, I would actually just Google it, see where this plant has actually originated from. This gives me an idea what the soil condition can be, and just Googling would actually give you a lot of information on what the best soil mixture that this plant prefers in. And sometimes with the soil mixture, you can't just sometimes buy just like the cactus mix from the actual stores, or a potting mix from the store, and just use that. Sometimes you've got to mix it. Sometimes you've got to add things like perlite or vermiculite or pumice or horticultural charcoal or orchid bark to actually get the right soil mixture for the plant. So sometimes by Googling it and see what this plant needs actually really helps, because there's no use saying, for example, having a succulent that likes a well-draining soil mixture and using just pure potting mix. It's not going to like those conditions. And it's also like if you have a tropical aeroid plant like a philodendron or anthurium, and you end up putting it into a cacti soil mixture, it's not going to like it. So it's important just to do some research and just finding out more information on what the plants require in the soil mixture. The other time I notice is that sometimes using changing the actual type of pot and not adjusting the water condition, because with pots, there's different pots that are available. You have plastic pots, you have ceramic pots, glazed ceramic pots, terracotta pots, glazed terracotta pots. These the actual water in the soil can actually evaporate at different rates depending on the pot that's used. So for example, if you're growing your plant into a plastic nursery pot and then moving into a terracotta pot, well, the terracotta pot actually the water actually evaporates, not just the water in the soil will evaporate, not just at the top of the soil, but actually the sides of the terracotta pot as well. So it's going to need more watering more faster compared to using a nursery pot. And so you need to adjust the actual watering. And the best way is just to, if you're not sure, just monitoring the water level in it. I just sometimes use just a moisture meter, and that really helps. Rather than use my finger, because I don't get my finger dirty, I just use a water moisture meter, and that helps me determine how wet or moist the soil can be. And I also found that by changing, if you're using a plastic nursery pot, using a clear plastic nursery pot, I think it's been really helpful, and I'm starting to change to using a clear plastic nursery pot, because that just gives me a better idea on how the roots are going as well. So if they're new roots are growing or they're healthy roots they grow, it's just easier to see. I also found that when repotting a plant, it's important that to be successful is that when repotting a plant, make sure that you check the root system and make sure that the only sort of decaying roots or rotten roots are actually cut away before repotting it into the new pot, because this will help to reduce root rot, and basically which is fungal disease. It also helps by, when repotting it, just dipping it into a rooting hormone, so rooting powder. This not only just helps to actually seal the ends of the roots to prevent rotting, it also helps the plant to, it promotes the plant to grow more healthy roots. And also when repotting the plant, I've done this a few times where I've been a bit lazy. I haven't actually dug deep down enough in the soil, so that plant is actually not deep enough in the soil. It's actually sitting too high up in the soil. And so what happens is that the plant is not being able to get enough water and nutrients from the soil. So the general thing I would recommend is that when repotting a plant, just make sure that all the roots are underneath the soil, and maybe give it like 3 centimeters, which is approximately 2 inches, for the last top part of the roots to be underneath the soil, just to make sure that the actual plant is actually firmly in the soil and not sitting at the top. Because like this one here, this is a philodendron, a pink princess, and what happened was these are plugs, so they're little baby sort of philodendrons. And what happened is that I was a bit lazy. I didn't dig far down deep enough in the soil, and so when I just covered it lightly with soil, a lot of the soil, it actually washed away when I was watering it. So they're actually sitting at the top, and so they couldn't gain enough water in the soil, and they were starting to die. Lucky I caught it in time, and I repotted it again, and so I dug further down in the soil. I popped these plug plants in deeper into the soil, and I backfilled it with more soil, and I also made sure that I actually firmly tapped down the soil to make sure that the plants are actually firmly in the soil. Sometimes what I do is I also made sure that I actually use a stick to get rid of air pockets as well, because sometimes you think, oh, the plant is actually firmly in the soil, but there's lots of air pockets maybe on the side or underneath the plant. And if there's air pockets in the soil, it means that the plant is not going to gain the water and nutrients in that area. So it's going to slow down the growth of the plant. So I just use a chopstick to go around the actual plant and making sure that I try and get rid of the air pockets. Even after watering the plant, I just make sure that if I notice that the soil is sunken down and the roots are being exposed, just to top fill the top part of the soil, just to make sure that all the roots are actually underneath the soil and not sitting on top. I found the best time to repot a plant is during spring and summer, where the weather tends to be warmer, where there's more light available for the plants to grow. And what has happened is that a lot of times I've killed plants by repotting it in the middle of winter or even autumn. Say for these Hoyas or even peperomias, I tend to find that these type of plants generally can be very susceptible from dying if repotting it in the colder weather, because a lot of Hoyas can withstand cold, but there's a lot of Hoyas that don't like the cold and they prefer the warmer weather, which is like above like 25 degrees, which is roughly around about 78 Fahrenheit, and they don't like temperatures below 10 degrees, which is roughly about 50 Fahrenheit. And a lot of times I've killed so many Hoyas by just sometimes being bored and I just want to repot a plant. I just end up repotting a Hoya and it actually dies on me. And so choosing to repot during the spring and summer, it gives the plant more light, warmer weather to actually be more less detrimental when repotting a plant. And that's really helped a lot of my plants to survive repotting. I found that also a lot of times plants are quite hardy. Usually plants are quite hardy. They generally survive repotting. And if you're finding that you are having a lot of plants that actually die after repotting, you can negate the actual issues that can arise from repotting, like for example big pots or using the wrong pot or not having the right watering conditions, by actually giving the plant extra light. So maybe moving it in the area where the plant actually will receive extra light. It's actually less likely that the leaves will burn, because in most homes don't have enough, unless your home has big massive windows there, a lot of times it's unlikely that there's enough light to actually burn the leaves. It's more likely that the plants in the home will not receive enough sunlight. So actually moving the plant after repotting from an area that was receiving less light to an area that for it to receive more light can be a great way to actually counteract all the things that happen, all the stress that plant goes through during repotting. You can give an extra boost by making sure that the home conditions, the temperature is warm. So the temperature is about 25 degrees, which is about 78 Fahrenheit, and giving it an extra bit of humidity while it's adapting to its new home. Because in the end, a lot of plants do actually go through a lot of trauma while repotting, and we want to try our best to actually give it an extra tender loving care so that actually not only survives repotting but actually thrives as well. So they're all my tips on how to make sure that your plant survives after repotting. I'd love to hear about your actually gardening experience and your tips that you have. Leave it down in the comment section down below. And as usual, I'm always happy to answer your questions as well. If you did find that this content is helpful, don't forget to help your crazy plant lady out by hitting the likes button and subscribing to the channel. And if you want to know how to actually repot a philodendron, watch this video here where I go through it all with you. Enjoy us today, and I'll see you in the next video.